Let's look at these new dynamics that has come into Nigeria political landscape, sequel to, of course, the forthcoming general election of 2027, as it has to do with the entrance of a Goodluck Jonathan into the contest. It's no longer a rumor that a Jonathan wants to contest the 2027 presidential election, as one of his allies have confirmed that Jonathan already confided in him. But the point here is the North seem to be the one driving Jonathan into this contest. Because from all we can see, we can clearly see Northerners coming out to say that, yes, that Jonathan have met with key Northern figures ahead of the contest, possibly for consultation and all of that. And the way it stands, the North seem to have started this long before now. Because I remember that the son of Erufai, the other time, was quoted to have said that when the father was going to consult Jonathan, that he sent a message across to Jonathan through the father, that the father should plead with Jonathan to forgive him, that he was naive when he criticized Jonathan in the past. So we're going to show that this thing didn't start today. But again, the man, Tinubu, who of course many see as a strategist, is not leaving anything to chance. We can clearly see another strategy coming from a very strange angle. This time around, through the INEC. It looks as if a Tinubu want to checkmate this time around the manipulation of election results in the North. And we are seeing INEC for the first time giving stern warning against multiple registration, underage registration, and possibly foreigners coming to Nigeria to vote. We know that this has always been the hallmark of the North. This has always been the strategy of the North to win election. If you see what we have here, it's saying continual voter registration. INEC won against underage multiple registration as exercise begins August 18. So you got to show that the commission will no longer condone any act of double registration. Of course, they have even come out to make it clear that the automated biometric identification system will identify anyone that does such, and that the offense is punishable under Nigerian law. So we're going to show that the strategy of the government have shifted to checkmate the North from having all the areas they used to manipulate election. But again, if you are looking at, if we look at that 2027 election, as it has to do with the possible aspirants, or rather will be candidates, you are looking at the man Tinubu, of course, who undoubtedly will be the candidate of APC. Then you are looking at an Atiku, you are looking at a Jonathan, you are looking at a P2B. Of course, these are major people who, as it stands, will likely contest that election. But the question here is, the argument of the North, or the strategy of the North to drive Jonathan into this contest, has to do with a Jonathan have only 4 years to stay in Aso Rock if elected, owing to the fact that he has spent 4 years in the past as elected president. Though he spent 2 years when his former principal died, talking about Yaradua. But the question here is, the North is not comfortable that if an Obi contests and win, that his pledge to govern for just 4 years, they are not comfortable, they are not convinced that an Obi will honor that, of course, pledge. Because constitutionally, an Obi have 8 years constitutionally to govern if he wins an election in Nigeria. So it goes to show that they are not convinced that an Obi will actually, will actually not contest for a second term if he wins the first term. And again, if you look at the man Tinubu and the man Goodluck Jonathan, it's a belief in some quarters that the reason the North is zeroing on Jonathan is because a Jonathan is like a willing tool in the hands of the North. Just like they did in the past, where a Jonathan could not even do any major project in the southern part of the country, even in his own state, even in his own local government, even his own locality, talking about Otweki. And there were a series of projects in the northern part of the country. to the point that he was building series of Adamajiri schools in the north. Though that is commendable because he actually wanted to, in fact, educate northerners who, of course, do not have who, of course, their leaders do not give attention to when it comes to educating them. But the point here is, why is the North not comfortable with the man Tinubu? Because perhaps the man Tinubu is not is actually giving them, is not actually allowing them have control over his government. The man Tinubu, of course, have shown that he is in charge. Though the way it is, many pundits, including myself, believe that there is so much hardship in the land, occasioned by excesses of, or rather the inability of the government, the present government, to address the hardship that comes with their policies, particularly the unification of FS at the official window and the subsidy removal on gasoline. But the question is, the North is not comfortable with Tinubu because before now we have seen so much accusation against him in terms of lopsided appointments, in terms of how he moved some departments of CBN, even FAN from Abuja to the southern part of the country, specifically Lagos. And again, we have equally seen that it was even a Buhari government, or rather Buhari himself, under his watch, that started this lopsidedness when it comes to appointments. When it comes to marginalization, of course, Muhammad Buhari did it and he elevated it to the highest level. That is what I often say, that a Tinubu is, of course, have leveraged or learned more than his master, Muhammad Buhari. Because currently, the North is not comfortable. We equally saw the attempt, of course, maybe that is one of the sense the North is counting for the man, the current president, talking about Senator Ahmed Bola Tinubu. His attempt to right the wrong of the past, talking about his previous tax reform bills, though that bill has been signed into law. But the question is, the initial position of the president and his handlers when they came up with that bill was very simple. They wanted to correct some anomalies to ensure that areas that have derivation, areas where goods and services are consumed, actually get the attention and compensation they needed through revenue sharing. But unfortunately, the North vehemently oppose it. And before the bill could be passed into law, or rather before National Assembly could pass the bill, the North watered down the bill to the extent that they presented what they wanted. And that is the version the president signed into law. And there is every fear, because the president did not resist much, perhaps because of his second term ambition. So there is that fear that if Mr. President, talking about Senator Ahmed Bola Tinubu, wins a second time, he may revisit those tax reform bills. And if he does that, knowing that he is not seeking an election again, he may want to use his influence to actually ensure that what he wants stay true, unlike his disposition currently, where he considered heavily to the North. So it's going to show that the major reason they are drafting a Jonathan into it is, one, Jonathan is easier to, of course, control, and Jonathan have more of a listening ear, from our understanding. But the question is, the North should not be the one to choose the president for Nigeria. Whether a Tinubu, whether a Jonathan, whether an Obi, of course, in all of the three, Obi is my preference. Because I believe that Obi have what it takes to deliver Nigeria from the president's quagmire. Having been the best person, of course, if you check history, he has a history of cutting costs of governance. Not just that, he has a history of course, prudent management of public funds. So you're going to show that, and if you come to look at it, what Nigeria need at this point in time is prudent management of the scarce resources. So if you put Obi in the saddle, I'm of the belief that wastage will be cut down. And that the money that is being wasted can be plugged back into the economy to address infrastructural decay. So if we are looking at how to come out of this problem, economic problem, I think Obi is well positioned to do that. So personally, I believe that the North should better be preoccupied with the myriad of challenges confronting the North. As it stands, we have so many problems confronting the North, ranging from out-of-school children, insecurity, poverty, and all of that. And come to think of it, why should the North be experiencing this level of out-of-school children? I'm talking about a situation where in some states, you have 60-something% of children of schooling age, talking about children of between 0 and 16, who are supposed to be in school, who are not in school. In some of the northern states, you have 40-something%. In some states, you have 30-something%. You go on and on like that. You need to wonder, why have they not been able to address it? And surprisingly, it's shocking anyway, recently, when the North will be listing their grievance against federal government, they listed out-of-school children. Though the Constitution, talking about the universal basic education, put the responsibility of training the Nigerian child on the 3 tiers of government, talking about the federal, state, and local government. But, however, going by that universal basic education, what behoves of federal government to do is the funding and the policy direction. They see to the working of it, the responsibility of seeing to the working of it rests with the state and local governments. So the question is, why are they not addressing it? Because the southern part of the country have been addressing it. Because it is a system that runs whether in the north or in the southern part of the country. And apart from that, if you take a critical look at this insecurity, particularly as it has to do with the testimony that came from the Zamfara State governor recently, that they know the bandits, that they know where they come from, that they know who they are. But that the problem is that there is a limit to what they can do. You need to ask, as a governor who has sworn to an oath to protect lives and property, as a governor who the buck rests with him, as a governor who is the governor and the chief security officer of his state, telling the press that there is a limit to what he can do, perhaps because the command and control of Nigerian security architecture comes from the federal government. But the question is, why are they not supporting the devolution of power? Why are they not supporting and pushing for creation of state police to enable them possess the power needed to address it? Why are they not in the forefront in doing this? Because we understand that when it comes to power, the Governors Forum, Nigerian Governors Forum have enormous power. We have seen them demonstrate that in the past in so many areas. Of course, in the past, we saw, even under Muhammadu Buhari, as stubborn and strong a Buhari was deemed to be. We saw Nigerian Government Forum standing against executive orders that came from Muhammadu Buhari, and Muhammadu Buhari was forced to rescind such order. Not one, not twice. So why is it that in this case, when Nigerians are yearning for solution, they are not using that power to approach federal government? I understand that even currently, federal government have even put forward. It looks as if the way it is, the ball is even now in their court. Because the federal government have already come up with the idea of forest guard. And they have since asked the states, or directed the states rather, to recruit between 5,000, 2,000 and 5,000 personnel, depending on their financial capacity to pay. And good thing, federal government have made it clear that owing to the subsidy removal on gasoline and integration of FS, that means more money for government, the state governments and local government have been receiving more money. So it's going to show that money to pay the personnel will not be a challenge. So the question is, why have they not engaged the forest guards? Why are we still at the point where Nigerians are still hopeless in terms of how to protect lives and property? Because if you look at what is happening in some parts of Zamfara State, in some parts of Katsina, in some parts of Benue, parts of course, Plateau, Southern Kaduna, you need to wonder, where are we going? Particularly the issue that happened in Zamfara recently, the situation where about 57 persons were abducted by bandits. And as at the last count, they asked them to pay 1 million each as ransom. Those who were not able to pay, of course, they were disallowed one after the other. I think this is a high level of irresponsibility on the part of government, because it becomes on government to protect lives and property. Section 14, subsection B. Section 14, subsection 2B of the Nigerian Constitution is very clear. That the welfare of the people and their security shall be the primary purpose of governance. So where the government is not able to do this, it means the government have failed in the very cardinal area of governance. So the way it is, the northern leaders must, as a matter of urgency and necessity, address three major things. One, insecurity. Two, out of school children. Three, poverty in the region. Because in spite of all the years the northerners have occupied Aso Rock or other leadership position in Nigeria, whether under the military rule, whether under democracy, why are they still having the highest level of poverty in the country? It's a million question that northern leaders have to answer. I think I must say very thank you for your time. This is South African and Mr.